Huh, if only there was a way to have seen that attack coming. Hello everyone and welcome. Today I answer the question, can you beat Elden Ring without the camera? Well, sort of. Obviously the camera still exists, and I don't think me talking over a black screen with various game noises would make for a great video, so what I actually mean is beating the game without ever touching the right analog stick. Since I've already beaten the game without the left one, I thought why not make it symmetrical? You know, perfectly balanced, as all things should be. Originally, I didn't think this run would be that difficult. I mean, I can agree with a half dozen comments already under this video saying, if do damage, can win, doom dumb. But to my pleasant, or maybe unfortunate surprise, it's actually much harder than I thought, but I'm getting ahead of myself. In the beginning, I was lulled into a false sense of security by the fact that the camera will slowly follow the player, which effectively means I do have a way to look at things. It moves even faster while using torrent, so traveling around the overworld shouldn't be that big of an issue, especially since I've beaten the game 16 quintillion times at this point. That being said, there are several points where I just have to blindly jump off of cliffs hoping I remember where to land. Good thing there are no notoriously difficult platforming sections in this game. That sure would suck. But you know what doesn't suck? The most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made, and today's sponsor, War Thunder. In addition to having an awesome name that sounds like a metal band from the 80s, War Thunder boasts a roster of over 2,000 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships, all of which are incredibly detailed and modeled down to their individual components, allowing you to have a truly immersive combined arms combat experience. And you can play it right now for free on PC, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and the previous console generation. One of my favorite things really is the collection of vehicles that spans over 100 years of development. Like, I'll be honest, I'm not a history buff, but the level of details on these machines and War Thunder's dedication to being historically accurate is just really cool, and I respect it. But don't let that distract you from the intense PvP battles at various immersion levels for all playstyles. Personally, I prefer to sit back and pick off my enemies from a distance. You can use my link in the description to get a large free bonus pack that includes multiple premium vehicles, a premium account, boosters, and much more. So what are you waiting for? Download now and play for free on PC, PlayStation, and Xbox. But wait, there's more! War Thunder often hosts special events with cool and unique twists on regular gameplay, and right now until the end of July they're running a crossover event with the first-person shooter Atomic Heart. In this event, you can control and fight some of the terrifying machines of Atomic Heart and earn unique, time-limited in-game rewards, so if you're watching this video in July of 2023, don't miss out on this cool event. Big thanks again to War Thunder for sponsoring this video. Now back to our regularly scheduled programming. I use a Morningstar I found to have Gray also kindly donate a few thousand runes and then level up Vigor, Endurance, and Strength. I wasn't sure what weapon I was going to use, so I was hesitant to pump any damage stats, but I did know that I wanted it to be a somber weapon because they're easier to level up. If only there was some really strong weapon in Limgrave that could carry me through the whole run. Oh well, for now I decided to stick with the Morningstar because it's got bleed on it and I have a few smithing stones laying around, so it's time to take on Margit. So let me show you why this run is going to be difficult. Here I am just happily attacking him, then suddenly, he jumps away from me. Normally that wouldn't be an issue, but then you remember, I have no way to turn the camera in any realistic time frame to see what he's doing. After I did find him, I saw he was passive, so I wanted to try and turn the camera around, but then I heard him wind up a charge attack. From experience, I knew if I was far away, he would rush me and swing twice, giving me enough time to get away and heal. After that, I heard him spawn a holy weapon, but I wasn't sure which one it was. I guessed the dagger, but I also guessed wrong. However, I got lucky with some iframes. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that the sounds the bosses make and distinguishing what attacks they are is going to play a crucial role in this run. For Margit, it wasn't a huge deal because I have more health than he does thanks to Grayall, but going forward, it's going to get much harder. I decided to go the back way through Stormveil for easier access to a specific Grey Slater, and what kind of Dr. Wily operation is this? Who installs instant death bits in their own castle? Come on! I grabbed the Claw Talisman figuring something is usually better than nothing, then take on the king of the castle, Godrick. That hit was intentional, it was a mind game. Phase 1 was giving me a little bit of an issue because the moment he got behind me, which was fairly easy if he'd do his big tornado jump, I just couldn't see what he was going to do. But just like with Margit, I have more than enough health to compensate. Phase 2 was not an issue. I mean, it starts with him standing still and that's just free damage. Speaking of damage though, I noticed mine's a little low. At this point my Morningstar was only a +2, and while that's totally fine for Godrick, that damage is going to fall off pretty quickly. As I was riding around Liurnia collecting random items, I tried to think of a good weapon to use. Since I couldn't look at my enemies to consistently dodge them, I wanted something that would drain their health bar fast. Status effects, specifically Bleed or Frost, would be great for that. Then it hit me. There is a strong early game somber weapon that also has bleed on it. Reduvia! Surely there's no other early game weapon that fits those requirements, but if there is, how about you tell me what they are in the comments below, and while you're down there, how about giving a like and subscribing? It really helps the channel out. So, even though I finally decided on a weapon, I unfortunately didn't have the levels to wield it. But I knew the next boss was the Red Wolf, who is known for being A, a good boy, and B, having very little health, so the Morningstar is fine. I ended up fighting him in this back corner almost the whole time, but that wasn't really a tactical decision, it's just that his body is big enough, anytime I try to roll around it, he just ends up behind me anyway. But even with his runes and a few poppables, I'm still just shy of the one level necessary, so I did what anyone in this position would do. Tried to farm using the bowling ball, only to realize when you can't see what you're doing, it's not a great idea. Fortunately, there is a graveyard I can rob nearby that has some high level souls, and with that, I can now use Reduvia. Even though I planned on relying on bleed for most of my damage, it being at +0 probably isn't the best idea, so I head into High Road Cave to get some extra runes to level up. I didn't realize how much verticality there was in this game until I was forced to walk off so many ledges and just leap of faith my way down. I chose this specific cave because the Guardian Golem drops the blue Dancer Charm, and even though I do plan on using armor later, if my weapon is going to be so lightweight, I might as well get as much out of it as I can. Over at EG, I was ready to power up my weapon to a +4, only to realize Somber Stones are kind of expensive. I could go and get some from caves and runes, but I am lazy. So here I am, ready to take on Renala, naked with a +1 Reduvia. What could possibly go wrong? Phase 1 is rarely ever an issue, and this time it's no different. Thanks to the bleed, it's an easy 2-cycle, even if just barely. Phase 2 is, well, a little bit more annoying. First, my little dagger doesn't do enough poison damage to stagger her in one hit, which will probably be important for later, but for right now it means I'm getting a cane to the face every 7 seconds. That's fine, I like getting hit in the face. No, really. The problems start when she gets to half health and begins summoning things, because for the most part, that just means I need to run away from her. On the upside, the arena is fairly large, so it's not hard to try and circle back for the camera to reposition. The whole time I'm running away, I'm listening to what she does. If she goes to summon something, it usually means the first thing is despawned. Luckily, she's pretty passive when her summons are up if you haven't hit her. This fight was honestly more tedious than it was difficult. Half the time I would run up and hit her, only for her to summon something and I had to run away. In the end, I tried to use the Ash of War for extra bleed buildup. I couldn't aim it by locking onto her, but as long as she's directly in front of me, it works. And it has the added bonus of staggering her. Amazing, flinging blood at her causes a stagger, but actually hitting her with the dagger doesn't. I take her runes and immediately make my weapon a +4, then buy the knight's armor. Unfortunately, it's a lot heavier than I thought it would be, so I just put the pants on. I also grab the axe talisman, which won't really help me with my dagger at all, but I have a sneaking suspicion I'll need it later. My next target is the Draconic Tree Sentinel, and I could probably take him on head to head, but why work hard when you can work smart? Funnily enough, I think the only other time I've ever done this cheese was in my no walking video. I guess the two challenges really are in balance. Anyway, after letting the Demon Lorax die of old age, I make my way into Lanedale. Nothing really happens in the capital. There are a couple of parkour sections, the first being over the houses, which is really easy. The second is on these branches, but fortunately these happen to be going upward, so it's pretty easy to actually see where I'm going. Sure hope there aren't any tree-related areas later that go downward. That would suck. Godfrey is... I mean, he's just kinda there. He can't be bled, but I'm pretty comfortable with his moveset, even while I'm not able to see what he's doing. Most of the fight was spent in this little alcove to the side of the arena. On the one hand, it was difficult to maneuver, but on the other, anytime he would zip around, I'd be able to see when he'd go for a stomp. I was curious to know how much Bloodblade would do to him, and the answer was... well, not a lot, but I did get this cool moment where him being hit caused his animation to jerk to the side, and his attack missed me, so... worth it. A few more swings later, and the first Elden Lord's ghost goes down, so following that easy fight is well, a not so easy one. Morgott. I hate this fight. Okay, that's not fair. I actually really like this fight. You know, normally. But I don't get to play this game normal anymore. Alright, so what's the issue? I mean, Morgott is just Margit, but harder. That's true, except when I took on Margit, he did very little damage, and I had way more health than the game thought I would at that time. The problem is, neither of those things are still true. My health has barely changed since that encounter, and he's no longer holding back. These issues, however, aren't specific to Morgott. I'm just getting to the point where the game would expect me to know how to handle dodging or blocking. But I can't do that because I can't see what I'm supposed to dodge or block. So then, what is the issue with Morgott? What makes him such a sudden spike in difficulty? Well, have you ever watched Morgott fight? The man has never skipped leg day and treats the arena like a frickin' springboard, launching himself all over the place every 2.5 nanoseconds. To be fair, that's technically also not an issue specific to Morgott. I mean, basically every boss has at least one anime, nothing personal kid attack, but combine his agility with attack power, and this is where this run starts to become difficult. On my first attempt, I actually got close. Kinda. I figured I could do it if I kept trying, but I knew the boss following this would be a different story, so it's time for an upgrade. First, I deal with Patches so I can get Market Shackle, then I head over to the Academy and get the Glintstone Webblade. Down in Stillwater Cave, I take out the Cleanrot Knight for the Winged Sword insignia, then I grab the Green Turtle Talisman from Summonwater Village. But unfortunately, I actually can't take off Radagon Source Seal. I didn't pay attention earlier, but I actually need the dex boost it's giving to use Reduvia. Oh well, that'll just have to wait till after Morgott. I then infuse a regular dagger with some frost, and in my infinite wisdom, decide not to level it up. My plan was to simply rely on the frost buildup and procs, but maybe the real reason was I was just being cheap, I don't know. Either way, I really didn't plan this out very well. The left-handed dagger attacks more than the right-handed one when power stance, at least for the first few hits, which means that not only was I hitting him with a weaker weapon more often, the bleed buildup would become slower, and once the frost procced, that dagger basically became useless until it wore off. However, this is all hindsight, and I just kept throwing myself at him over and over. The plan ultimately ended up being to pin him with the shackle and build up as much status as I could. Starting from his phase transition, I would try and throw blood at him. It doesn't do a lot of damage, but the bleed buildup should be unaffected, and thus is a safe way to try and chunk off some damage. Usually. It took a couple dozen tries, but eventually the Omen King goes down. First thing I did was level up Dex 3 times so I could stop taking extra damage from this seal, then I headed into the Altus Tunnel to get the Somber Bell Bearing. Fun fact, the Crystallians can be frozen. That was just surprising to me. I assumed they had immunity to all status effects considering they are, you know, not flesh, but I guess even crystals get cold. Also, it's kinda neat to see the difference in damage between the two daggers here, like small tiny slivers of damage for the regular dagger, then much more for Reduvia. I should really stop being stubborn and just level this thing up if I want to keep using it. Is what a normal sane individual would say, but even here I decided to keep it at 0, but it's okay as I had a backup plan. In Stormveil I pick up the Godskin Prayer Book, which will allow me to cast Black Flame Blade. To be honest, I was on the fence about using this or not. It felt kinda cheap to just sap away a percentage of a boss's health. On the other hand, f*** the Fire Giant, so why not? That being said, I wasn't sure if I was ready to take him on yet, and I don't have a good transition for this, so General Radahn. At the time, I was telling myself that this is like a test to see if I'm ready for the Fire Giant, and looks like I'ma fail that exam. The fight actually isn't bad when Frost and Bleed proc, as it pushes him into the second phase almost completely by itself. Unfortunately, I couldn't look to the sky to see where he was coming from, and yeah. Second attempt, I decided to just pick a random direction and go in a straight line, which worked out much better. I hadn't noticed until now, but Radahn here has a lot of attacks that circle around the player, which absolutely sucks and means I am 100% relying on memory for when to time my dodges. Eventually though, he succumbs to the 1,000 paper cuts and it's time to face my giant fiery demon. Funnily enough, these two daggers were also my setup for the no walking video. Weird. Also, I finally decided to wise up and am now rocking a plus 13 dagger. So yeah, I'm pretty much the apex predator. Anyway, phase 1 isn't that big of an issue. Anytime he rolls away, I have to sprint over to him and catch up, and in doing so, the camera has enough time to actually reposition itself. Black Flame Blade does a lot less than I was expecting. I mean, it's not bad, but I was expecting a little more healthy, melty goodness. But either way, this is just kind of a standard Fire Giant fight. Phase 2, however, is where the problem started. Here, watch this and tell me if you can see what's wrong. Look normal? Well here, how about now? Yeah, the camera is up my ass for half the fight. I mean, I know it's a good view, but like, buy a guy a drink first. The reason this happens, I assume, is for that sweet cinematic shot when phase 2 starts, and normally you would just move the camera to see what you're doing, but obviously I can't do that here, so I just have to keep fighting the Fire Giant while doing my best impression of a turkey caught in the rain. On my first attempt, he ended up rolling in place on top of me, and I just... I love this fight. It is such a good fight. Want to know what's really nerve-wracking? Being this close to killing him, then he starts to cast Burn O Flame, which of course I can't see where the pillars are erupting from, and I have no idea how close I am to the edge of the arena. Yeah, this isn't a great time. Fortunately, I got really lucky and he didn't do his stupid fire breath attack and insta-kill me, letting me down him on the second attempt. I'm never going to complain about the camera ever again. Except for, you know, the other like 300 times I'll probably do it in the rest of this video. The next main boss is going to be the Godskin Duo, and I don't want to. I do not want to fight that boss. So I'm not going to. Well, sort of. I will go in there and win, but I'm gonna do it my way. So to prepare, I head over to Caelid and into these rooms. At this point, I'm way over leveled, so the Duo Pumpkinhead boss is not a problem, and with their defeat, I can pick up my prize, the Visage Shield. Wait, that's not right. Oh, ha, silly me, I'm in the wrong runes, because they all look the frickin' same. Although, seeing this shield does give me an idea for a future run. Anyway, about 50 meters over in these runes, I grab what I actually wanted, St. Trina's sword. Right out of the box, this thing is good to go because I don't actually need to do damage with it, I only want it for its status buildup. That's right, I'm a sleep cheese the duo. The plan is to put them to sleep and then do as much damage as I can to them through poise breaks, that way they won't be able to retaliate, but the problem is that I don't think my 2 daggers are able to do that. So it's about time I went off and got a different weapon, and I have the perfect one in mind. I make my way through Altus Plateau and into a massive volcano where I take on the Godskin Noble. This is actually a perfect test for my sword as a sort of control, and I'm happy that when buffed it only takes a couple of hits to sleep the Noble. Then my 2 daggers with Black Flame Blade absolutely eviscerate his health bar. Unfortunately, as I predicted, it isn't enough to either kill him nor stance break him, so now I have to try and avoid his rollout while not being able to see it, and that's terrifying. I have to be really careful not to accidentally hit him one too many times when trying to sleep him, because if I do that, he'll just immediately wake up and basically make it harder to sleep him again. Not that I've ever done that before. Anyway, in this case, I'm able to 3-cycle him, which isn't terrible, but it's definitely not ideal, especially when the next time I see him, there'll be another annoyance in the room. Making my way further into the manor, I happen upon Rykard, as well as my weapon of choice, the Serpent Hunter Spear. Now, I'm not super familiar with Elden Ring speedrunning, but I'm pretty sure, at least in earlier patches, this spear was king, and for good reason too. It has amazing damage, great scaling, and literally 0 stat requirements. Even unupgraded, the thing absolutely shreds Rykard, and I beat him no problem. Is what I would like to say, but in phase 2, these stupid lava pools kept spawning underneath me while I was trying to chain stunlock him, and since I can't move the camera to see where they are, I kinda rolled back into one. Well, on the second try, he goes down easy. Since my plan for the duo was to stagger them out of sleep, I figured I might as well lean into it and get the dagger talisman. Then I had the great idea of trying to drop down from here to get to Somber 7, but when I landed on the cage, I realized I couldn't turn the camera to see where to fall next. I'm not super familiar with the layout of this dungeon, like, at all, but I took an actual leap of faith, then slowly walked my way around to this platform to try and rotate the camera. My plan was to use the chains as an indicator as to where to fall, and it did work out in the end. Because of falling down here, I'm able to collect an easy Somber 7, and then combined with the 8 and 9 from Caelid, I have a nearly full-powered Serpent Hunter Spear, so now there is no holding back, and it's time to head to Fair Missoula to take on the duo. My first attempt went, not too great, and same with the second, but like they say, third time's a charm, and I'm successfully able to put both of them to sleep while mostly unharmed. Now I'm on the clock. Fortunately, it's pretty easy to down the Apostle by getting off 3 fully charged attacks and following up with a riposte. It doesn't outright kill him, but it gets him pretty close, so a couple of follow-up attacks do the trick. To my surprise though, as I turned to face the Noble, he was already waking up. That felt much shorter than any other time I've slept them, which caused some problems. While I did do good damage to him, he was able to summon the Apostle back, and he was about to go into phase 2. Not exactly the best situation to be in. At one point, while I was trying to reposition the camera, I heard him start his rollout, and I just had to guess what angle he was coming at me from. But then I got lucky with him casting a fireball so close to me and I could take him out, which gives me a little bit of breathing room to try and put the Apostle to sleep. At this point it's not quite GG, as they still have a bit of health left, but with it only being knockoff Smo left, it's not hard to reapply sleep, then it's actually GG. And let me tell you, I am so happy this fight's over. Surely it'll be smooth sailing from here, not like the next boss is known for being all jumpy and agile or anything. On my way, I stopped to grab the Dragon Crest Shield Talisman Plus 2, figuring at some point I would start wearing armor, rendering the Blue Dancer Charm worthless, and this would be a nice addition. Alright, on to Maliketh. Both phases he is incredibly aggressive, high damage, decent range, and has several attacks designed to reposition himself behind the player, and in phase 2 gets Destined Death and the ability to fly. To be honest, Maliketh seems like the hard counter this run. My first attempt went decently enough. Getting through phase 1 with a few Estus as backup is probably going to be necessary. When I got to phase 2 though, yeah, maybe fighting him naked isn't the best idea. I grab Radahn's set, but it's too heavy, so I mix and match it with the Knight set to keep it a mid-roll, then just start throwing myself at the boss hoping for a miracle. Eventually, I made it back to phase 2 where I promptly died. I'll save you all a lot of time and just tell you that nearly all of my attempts followed this pattern, so I decided to grab the Blasphemous Claw. In most cases, I probably wouldn't be able to see his attacks coming, but there is a sound cue for when he can be parried. I also noticed here that the camera actually has collision, at least with the environment. I guess that's something I sort of knew, but specifically I mean if I try to circle around something with the edges like the pillars here, the camera will snap much faster than if I just run in a big circle. Unfortunately, for all of the remaining bosses, this isn't going to be helpful because they're all in just big empty arenas. Eventually, after a couple hours of attempts, I got some good RNG where I managed to go into phase 2 from a fully charged heavy, and since Maliketh always starts the same way, I can get a second one guaranteed, basically ensuring a riposte follow-up. Or it would have been if I was able to see what I was doing. Either way, he then tries to do his flippy combo, but since I was close to him, I knew he would cut it short and try to slam down, allowing me to parry him. This animation is long, like long enough for me to get off 2 fully charged heavies and a jump attack without worry, which conveniently is enough to stance break him again, and extra conveniently I can see what I'm doing this time so I can actually get the riposte off. It's not a terribly large amount of damage, but it is guaranteed damage, so I'll take it. Further, he can actually be hit soon after, allowing me another fully charged heavy, giving him no pixel HP, but I've been here before, as long as I don't choke. What, did you actually think I would choke there? Well, that makes 2 of us, but thankfully I didn't, and the Black Blade is no more. The next main boss is Gideon, if you can even call him that, but fighting NPCs without a camera is not an enjoyable experience, so I decided to head into the sewers. Oh, look, I missed some narrow platform on my way down. I'm sure that's a one-off and won't ever happen again. The rest of the sewers aren't bad, and it's off to fight Mohg. I made sure to pick up a shackle because I'll want it later, but for now my plan is to just bleed and frost this one into oblivion. After like 2 seconds though, I remembered, this one can't be afflicted by status. Oops. I was doing pretty good damage anyway, but I opted to quit out and return to Monk by beating him to death with my big pointy stick. Alright, it's time for the section I've been making jokes about this whole time, this stupid platforming bit. Wanna see how my first attempt went? This drop isn't even necessary, it's just how I always go down. It took a handful of practice goes, but it's honestly not as bad as I thought it would be, although part of that is probably because I've done it so many times. I mean, sure, it's literally like 7 leaps of faith in a row, but it could have been worse. Could have been 8 leaps of faith in a row, now that would have been impossible. Anyway, the reason I went this way was for Inescapable Frenzy, something I'll be using on Gideon later. Unfortunately, I haven't done the quest to fight Fortissax yet, but I can at least activate the graces down here for easy warping later. The next boss up is the other dragon, Placidusax. Or should I say, the path to get to Placidusax. I already had an issue with how small the ledge is you have to drop on to get to him, but not being able to see just confirms that they should have made this like a staircase or something. I started off this fight with the intent to frost and bleed him because despite looking like he's made of rocks, he can in fact be hit with multiple status effects. The problem is that he is the mini resistant. So much so that I cut off like a third of his health bar and still hadn't procced either of them. That might not sound like a lot, but I was hitting him with daggers the whole time. In translation, I cut him many times and he didn't bleed. Or freeze. Anyway, I decided it wasn't worth it and mid-fight switched back to the Servant Hunter Spear. After all, what are dragons but snakes that can fly? The fight ended up being really close. Like, I had next to no health while he had a lot more than that. Fortunately, a lucky stagger led into him doing his big laser attack, which itself led into another stagger for me to finish the fight. I wasn't nervous at all. Yeah, anyway, let's continue the main quest. Since Gideon will let me get a shot off for free, I wanted to open strong. I thought about running around collecting everything to try and one-shot him, but I am lazy, so I just get the Ritual Sword Talisman and that's enough for me. You'll notice I still had the Servant Hunter Spear in my right hand. That's because in the past, the damage scaled off the crit of the right-handed weapon, but that entry seems to have been removed from the wiki when I checked, so perhaps it was a bug. Either way, I did occasionally use a charge attack on Gideon, so keeping it was fine. However, there was one thing I didn't account for with this strategy. It's weirdly hard to grab Gideon without being locked on, which may or may not have caused me to eat a few spells to the face, but hey. After a couple more attempts, Gideon here shows me he doesn't know that backsteps don't have iframes and goes down. Now, a real fight. I was cautiously optimistic about Godfrey. I handled his ghost form no problem, and the stop and scream time should be a great chance to poise break him, or at least lay on some damage. But Hoarah is very fast and loves to go for grabs. You know, if I had a nickel for every time I straight up jumped into his grabs, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it sure is depressing that it happened twice. And here we have me trying to get away from him, only to get clipped by the ghost of the outermost pixel of his attack. Yeah, okay, it's time for an upgrade. I could have done this a lot sooner, but I head back to Mistwood to pick up 2 tears. The green spill crystal will give me an extra bit of stamina, which is nice, but more importantly, the spiked cracked tear will buff my charge attacks. The hope being that I can more consistently stance break him during his hissy fit. Although, knowing my luck, this thing doesn't increase poise damage, only regular damage, which definitely would have been smart to research first, but oh well. And sure enough, on the very next try, he goes down. I was worried about one of the optional super bosses, and I'll give you 3 tries to guess who it is, so I opted to take on Radabeast now, that way if I failed the uber bosses, I still technically beat the challenge. That's not foreshadowing, I'm just explaining. Or is it? Nah, it's not. But maybe. Radagon, one of my all-time favorite fights. So there is one thing I noticed much earlier that can help make fights easier, but I never used it, and that was to fight completely up against the wall. The reason I didn't like doing it was because while you could see the enemy, or at least some weird semi-transparent version of them, the camera would zoom in, making it hard to see, well, the actual fight. However, Radagon's arena doesn't have walls, and it's also not possible to fall off the edge. The only problem is that there's no room to maneuver and you basically just have to dodge right into him for everything, which I mean, works, I guess. Other than that, the fight's pretty easy because it's heavily scripted, and by heavily scripted, all I mean is that he goes into phase 2 and 3 at the same health thresholds every time, so you can plan stance breaks around that. Elden Beast is, mostly normal. He has the same annoying camera angle thing that the Fire Giant did, except slightly less severe. The only real problem is when he casts the rings attack and I can't tell when I need to jump over them because, you know, no depth perception at this angle. I did get pretty lucky with the fact that he never ran away and did any real ranged attacks, so I never had to worry about dodging golden sword beams, and after a couple minutes, Elden Beast falls and I have beaten the game without the right analog stick. With the main game taken care of, it's time for some optional bosses, and first up is Fia's Champions. They're, well, that's about what I expected. I will say it's annoying trying to run away from the trio, especially because I'm basically just listening to Leonel cast random death sorceries while trying to slowly turn around. With him down, I realize I still hadn't collected the Hollow Brand, so I make my way over to Caria Manor where Loretta definitely tried her hardest, and then talk to Ranni to start the whole quest line. Down in Nokron, I take on the Mimic and thought about unequipping my armor or going for a Frenzy build-up, but I thought a duel would be cool. Except the Mimic was on some 7D chess and kept trying to go for Great Serpent Hunt. Up next is Bambi, who, surprise, is still not an issue, but I did learn he can't die while teleporting. You know what, I give him points for being determined. In fact, he was so determined he did it twice in this one fight. Didn't stop me from taking him out though. I grabbed the Finger Slayer blade and traded out for what I am told is a very cool valuable wooden statue that I then place on this random pedestal to flip a tower upside down. Now, however, I have to navigate this upturned tower without being able to look down. Up. Now, whatever. The first part is fairly easy because the way down is just next to a wall, but it's this final jump onto the rafters that's difficult. I tried lining myself up with the beam and it almost worked. Second try though, I did manage to land on it. I was worried about needing to fall onto the second layer, but I learned right here that the fall isn't enough to kill me. It didn't even take any damage off, so I guess I was worried for nothing. Anyway, funny death centipede, nice huggy lady, massive dragon. I didn't think Vorticex would be a huge issue, mostly just because I'm falling back into the old I over level defense, and I was right. The only hard part is when he jumps high into the air, but with some well-timed dodges, and by that I mean spamming them, it's fine. Vorticex falls on the first try. I decided I might as well take on the other early mid-ish game boss that I skipped, Estelle. While I was running through the Scarlet Swamp, I noticed the Serpent Hunter Spear's sprinting heavy attack looks a lot like a charge you might do with a pike of some sort. Might be a cool run to do using only that, but oh well. For now I press on and continue deeper into the Earth, or whatever planet we're on. Hello, you big angry space scorpion. Are you ready to get cut in your skull mandible face area? Damage is absolutely not an issue here. Thankfully, he's mostly a stationary target, so the fight ends up over after only like a minute. Alright, 2 main bosses remain, so up at Castle Sol, I take on the Commander. Man, I am sure glad I'm wearing armor. After the 2 knights are dealt with, the fight doesn't get too much easier honestly, mostly because the Commander can throw himself around the arena with lightning attacks. I also, unfortunately, got stuck in this corner while he was doing his supercharge, so I couldn't capitalize on it as much as I normally would. Honestly, I just shouldn't be fighting him in this corner. I should be fighting him in this corner instead. It wasn't intentional, I was trying to keep him in the center of the arena, but no matter what, we just gravitated towards the corner. I wasn't sure if this final swing was enough to end it, but I bet everything on it, and for once, it paid off. Heading into Mohgwyn Dynasty, I realized I hadn't actually made my spear a +10, nor did I ever pick up the remaining Sacred Tears to max my healing, so I do both of those things while getting the Purifying Crystals here. What follows is a pretty mediocre Mohg fight, all things considered. I wanted to use the Shackle to stun him, with the original plan being to do it right before he goes into phase 2, but I learned you can't actually shackle him while he's counting down, so that's cool, I guess. But as long as I could keep him in frame, everything was fine. Which means, of course, he jumps high into the air and goes behind me. I ended up being in a really tight spot where I couldn't see him and he was throwing blood everywhere and just swinging that big old trident like an angry Poseidon. Fortunately, for once the stars aligned and Blade didn't proc when it was in range to kill me, then I no-you'd him into oblivion. Can you tell I'm trying my hardest to make Mohg sound interesting? Because I am. Anyway, with him out of the way, it's time to make my way to her. Ordina wasn't terribly hard because I could use the old camera wall trick to actually see where I needed to go, but then I got to the Haligtree. I hate the Haligtree. This is definitely one of the areas in the game I had to rely on memory to navigate, and I apparently have the memory of a goldfish. When I finally did get down, I also forgot that these battle mages here like the 360 no-scope, and I hate this place. So, Loretta. I completely destroyed her last time, but now she's back with more health, more spells, and more oh she's dead. Well, at least I got one last easy fight before the pain train. Making my way down the routes, I grabbed the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. Honestly, if I knew how easy Loretta was going to be, I'd have probably come and got it sooner. Then it's off to fight Malenia. So phase 1 isn't actually that bad. She's pretty passive, so even though she has loads of attack that will flip behind me, it's not hard to just run to the other side of the arena and reset neutral. Sure, when she's down to around 70% HP, there's always a threat she'll just eviscerate me out of nowhere, but since she won't do waterfowl in quick succession, it's mostly safe to try and bait it out than run away. I can't fall back on my usual strategy of jump attacks because unless she's directly in front of me, it's difficult to land them, but she staggers with any swing and has fairly low poise, so a close dodge followed by even a partially charged heavy attack is more than sufficient. So that's all well and good. Phase 1 is not a problem. But then I got to phase 2, and let me ask you, dear viewer, what do you think the issue is? Will it be that she's so aggressive I never have a chance to actually face her head on? Or maybe her Scarlet Raw buildup is just too much? Or maybe it's because the frickin' camera is taped to my ankles. I don't know why I didn't see this coming. When I record these runs, I take notes, and for Fire Giant, I have stupid camera looking at sky, and for Elden Beast, I also have stupid camera looking at stupid sky. So, I don't know why I didn't think this wouldn't happen for Malenia, but it does, and it sucks. My character is literally taking up 70% of the screen. I just can't see what I'm doing. Combine that with her aforementioned aggression, and it's just not a good time. But after a couple of tries, I realized the only restriction I put on myself was to not touch the right analog stick. So if I can't beat you, he can. Let's do it, Mimic Buddy. Me and you are gonna... Why? Why are you using Great Serpent Hunt? Yeah, so I guess all the times I joked about the Mimic having one brain cell is coming back to haunt me. He does do a pretty good job of keeping her occupied while I set up for charge attacks, but of course he's another target for her to heal off of. It also doesn't help that he'll kinda just stand in Scarlet Aeonia and tank the damage. Again, one brain cell. So, in theory, if I held off summoning the Mimic until phase 2, that would probably be enough to win, but suddenly I started sucking at the fight. Like, really badly. Like, I couldn't get past a quarter of her health in phase 1 badly. I was quickly becoming annoyed, but then it hit me. Again, the only restriction is to not touch the camera. So you know what, Malenia? F around and find out. I'm pretty sure I've never actually used Rivers of Blood, but there is something oh so satisfying about shredding Malenia with it, even more so with Mimic Buddy. There are other options I could have used. Flame Dance, which is the Ash of War for the Giant's Red Braid weapon, should have worked fairly well. Maybe Flame of the Fell God? I wasn't sure if that only worked while locked on or not, but either way, Rivers of Blood is straight up overpowered. And in other news, water. Wet. That's not to say it was a sure thing. I mean, like 99.7% chance of success, but since the Ash of War is still aimed by the position of the camera, it being tilted so high meant in phase 2 I did occasionally miss a swing, but as long as I stand right next to her, that's really a non-issue. And just like that, Malenia, the Goddess of Rot, falls, and I have beaten all of Elden Ring without touching the right analog stick. Once again, I want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, War Thunder. I really enjoy my time playing it, so I'm so thankful I had an opportunity to share the game with all of you, and don't forget you can click my link in the description below for some awesome in-game bonuses, and my friends, I look forward to seeing you on the battlefield. Thank you everyone for watching, and an extra special thanks to my patrons. Stay beautiful, y'all. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving a like and subscribing. It really helps the channel out, and why not check out my no walking video? The challenge between that one and this one are basically opposites. Again, all that symmetrical balance, I guess. But until next time, my friends, don't you dare go hollow.